This is a presentation of the Sports Source Digital Network, presented by Hearthside Bank.
Welcome into the Sports Source Digital Network. This special episode, we're going to talk a little football today. John Pennington joined by Ryan Callahan from GoVols247.com. Ryan, you cover recruiting over there, and I want to start out by talking recruiting. First of all, Tennessee, Josh Heupel has filled out his coaching staff again, but he did it by promoting guys from within. All right. Now, everybody on the staff can do some sort of recruiting, so you can tell me how much Coach Chop was out on the road. But I do wonder, and this is the main question, was there something lost in not going out and grab? I mean, Heupel is very big on culture, very big on promoting from within, but you're missing opportunities to go get really good recruiters who are proven that have, you could go swipe somebody off another SEC staff who has been a proven guy. Is there a negative to promoting from within when you choose to go that route on the recruiting trail?
In this case, no. This actually was a move that I think was motivated by recruiting. I think in this case, you could argue Levorn Harbin, Coach Chop, as he's known, is maybe Tennessee's most dynamic recruiter on the entire staff. So in this case, this move was a natural transition. It made perfect sense from the start. As soon as we heard Mike Eckler was leaving, we said Levorn Harbin's probably the guy. Yeah. And so in this case, I don't think. I mean, you could obviously get a higher profile guy, maybe. I mean, Harbin is a guy who's been a position coach in the past. It's been a while, and at smaller schools mostly. So there's that aspect. But aside from that, I mean, he's been an effective recruiter as an off-field guy at Auburn. He's done it at Tennessee now. So I think from a recruiting standpoint, this was kind of a home run. It's just a matter of, in previous cases, was there,
right? And the overall big picture of this for a guy, a head coach who continues to like to, especially on the offensive side. Yeah. And he did go out on the defensive side, but for the most part on the offensive side, since he's been here, it's been guy leaves, he promotes from within. Yeah. I just wonder if there's an opportunity there that might be missed along the lines. Yeah, maybe not in this case, but in others.
I was going to say, in previous cases, I think you can make an argument for that more so. That in this case, probably makes perfect sense to again take a guy who was already Tennessee's, maybe most effective recruiter overall, and put him on the full-time staff, reward him. He was being paid $300,000 plus as an analyst, right. So obviously he was highly regarded on the staff to begin with. And to take him, put him on staff makes sense. That's good for staff morale. Let's face it, you want guys, if you want to get good guys as analysts and as graduate assistants, you need to show that you're willing to promote from within. That's one positive to what Josh Heupel's done. You can get better GAs and analysts when you show that you're willing to promote those guys and give them a chance. But on the flip side, in the past, have there been some missed opportunities to go out and make your staff better recruiting-wise? You can make that case at least, but obviously they've made it work and got to the college football playoff doing it their way, so it's hard to argue with the results too much.
Yeah, I mean, you could also flip that. Let's say you go out and get good recruiters, but they don't fit the culture he wants. They don't know his system the way he wants them to know the system.
Don't develop talent.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sides to that, but it is certainly a question when a coach decides to go. If a coach is doing A, we're going to ask, would he be better off doing B? And if he's doing B, we're going to say, would he be better off doing A? That's just how you get answers. Let's talk about another issue that popped up this week, and then I'm going to throw one at you that we didn't talk about beforehand. You knew this one's coming, but the next one will spin off that. Ricky Gibson. Everyone knows that guys come back to the coach behind closed doors and have their hands out and say, I'm going to need more money to stay. I know I've got an NIL deal, but I need more or else I'm leaving. That happens all the time. In this case, his team, whoever that is, chose to go public, and he told a publication that he was going to be hitting the portal. This is before the portal's open. It's before spring practice. So this puts Heupel in a very precarious situation. What do you do with him at spring practice, first of all? Second of all, what do you do in terms of handing over cash? If you hand him the money, are you telling everybody, be a squeaky wheel because that's where the grease is going? Doesn't everybody know that to begin with? I mean, there are different layers to this, but is he better off saying, I'm not going to reward somebody who tries to strong-arm me, but then you cost your team because you've already got Jermod McCoy, who's questionable to start of the season with his ACL. You don't have how long it's going to take to get him back to 100%. So talk to me about Josh Heupel and the way he handles this thing, because it is an unusual situation.
Yeah, it's a real
for Tennessee.
Right.
It's not unusual in the grand scheme, but it's the first time he's really been hit with this one.
Yeah, unfortunately for coaches, something that's probably going to come up again, as you said, because of this one's already public.
Especially depending on how he handles this one,
Absolutely. And the flip side is if you let the player walk in this case, I mean, obviously, what are you saying to your fan base? Are you saying, I mean, this is the guy Tennessee clearly needs.
Yep.
What are you saying to the people who donate to your collective? What are you saying to your fans? Hey, we can't keep our own players that we need because we're worried about long-term negotiating tactics instead of making this the best team possible. So there's some really complicated dynamics to this. You hit on exactly why coaches don't want this stuff to be public. I mean, there's some players that obviously behind the scenes have come to them and said, hey, I need more money, and they've taken care of those situations in some cases, and in some cases they've really taken care of players.
Or you have parents who, I mean, you got the Nico Iamaleava case where he didn't come out and say he was transferring, but his father on social media sure made it sound like he was thinking about leaving.
Right.
And you would assume he was given a boost, a bump. So there's different ways to handle it. There's silence behind closed doors. There's hint at it, the way the Iamaleavas did, and then there's just out and out say it, which is what's going on here.
And obviously the trick is if he comes back, everyone's going to know you took care of it.
Yep.
So are other players going to follow his lead? Quite possibly, and you have to worry about that. But at the end of the day, I think this is the bottom line, and unfortunately for Tennessee, this is the reality. They need Ricky Gibson.
Yep.
He has all the leverage in this case, especially, as you said, in light of the Jamad McCoy injury. You don't know exactly when he'll be back. If he were to miss some time and Gibson leaves, you're left with Jalen McMurray and who else at corner. So you would definitely be in the transfer portal this spring looking for a replacement as a potential starter, at least part-time starter anyway. And would the cost of replacing him be greater than the cost of keeping him?
Right.
That's a fair question. So, and is there even enough talent available in the portal during the spring period when it tends to be guys who are not starters who are leaving their respective schools? So if you lose a guy or if you gain a guy from the portal there, it might not be someone who's proven as a starter, and you've got to take a chance on someone who's maybe got talent but been a number 3 or 4 corner somewhere. So it's overall, I think Tennessee needs to take care of it. I think they probably will take care of it and ultimately keep Ricky Gibson. But there's some tricky dynamics, as you said, because of how this has been handled and the fact that it was public before spring practice, which was probably not unintentional because now you have the better question might be not whether Tennessee allows him to practice, but whether part of the threat is I'm going to sit out spring practice if you don't pay me.
Well, and I think Jason Swain and Josh Ward talked about this on the radio show. I always give credit here where credit is due. I believe Swain brought up the point that, and this is a great point, it's not only, if he's not going to be here, you got to get somebody else ready.
Yep.
But you need your receivers going against your best guys, and you're already going to have McCoy out for the spring. So in terms of getting a bunch of new receivers ready, which he's going to have to play some freshmen this year at receiver, wouldn't you want them going against at least one of your top 2 corners?
I was just making that point to someone the other day. I'm not surprised that a former receiver made that point too.
Yes,
but so good observation on his part. But I thought, yes, I don't care personally if I'm Tennessee whether Ricky Gibson practices. I've seen him start a bunch of games. I can live without him out there, and hey, he doesn't risk injury. And Jamad McCoy already has gotten hurt this offseason, so that part I don't care. What I do care is Mike Matthews getting experience against good corners?
Yes.
Is Amari Jefferson settling in and adjusting to playing against good corners at this level? So, if you're facing nothing but true freshmen and maybe Jalen McMurray, that's a trickier situation. And you wonder, even if those guys have a good spring, if it really tells you anything about how good they are. So, iron sharpens iron, and there's a lot of value in having your best players out there.
In terms of Gibson, what do you do? I'm assuming, just talking to you, it sounds like you would give the guys money and build the team, which is what I would do too.
Well, that's the problem. It's easy from the outside to say, yes, I would pay him. We don't know the numbers involved.
No, that's true.
So I think just like any NFL negotiation, it depends on the price, right? If he comes in asking for $2 million a year, you might say, well, we've got no choice if that's the number. So, so it just depends on the situation. I think generally, assuming the ask is not astronomical, I think you got to take care of it. It's a guy that might be your only proven starter at corner for you never know, half the season. So I think you got to have him, and again, to replace him would be tricky in the transfer portal during the spring.
You would think he wouldn't come in asking for more than Jamad McCoy is getting.
Yeah.
If he did, okay, then you've made it to where McCoy's in line for a bump as well. The other part of this is I don't like the fact that the kid is strong-arming you in the media to make all this public. I don't like that. But I do think if you're in this to win it, and I think coaches have to be at this point, it's year to year. We've talked about this. You've talked about this. It's no longer a situation where you're building a program.
Yep. You're
building a team every year. You're just building a new team, more so than even in the NFL where you have 70% of your guys are under contract. You don't have the threat of everybody just saying, I'm leaving at once.
Yep.
College now, anybody can leave at any time. Portal doesn't matter. They'll say it before. A kid from Wisconsin will just leave without even being in the portal, and the NCAA says, yeah, we can't do anything about it. So I look at it and I think, yes, you are opening Pandora's box. You're going to have the devil to pay eventually because other people, it happened with the offensive line last year.
Yeah.
This guy's getting that much, and they all have their hands out. So you're going to get that, but I almost think you have to do it. It's just price of doing business at this point.
Yeah, I think you probably have to. And here's the thing about this, too. It's my understanding Ricky Gibson had already gotten a pay raise this offseason. But when you find out, and this is sort of where the risk of negotiating and trying to save yourself money can come back to catch up to you at any point. So if you get a player at a favorable deal and then he finds out other players on the team are making significantly more than he is, he still may come back to you later. And that's why the coaches want to get rid of that second transfer portal window. They don't like players having the ability to come back, check their work for 2 or 3 months, and then say, hey, I need more to stay. That's frustrating to these guys who, they're sort of negotiating in private, and you're hoping that details of other deals don't get out, but inevitably some of them do, and it leads to complications like this.
Well, and again, for the 7 billionth time, when you and I have been on a show together or here together, contracts would end this if you just sign deals. But the schools and the coaches still don't want to do that because they don't want to give up the TV revenue.
Yep, that's a lot of money to protect and a lot of jobs to protect in college athletic departments, a lot of facility improvements to protect, a lot of things that would go away probably if you lost that TV money.
Now, in terms of the other question I was going to throw at you, and we've talked about this before as well, but I was recently talking to somebody who is a booster who has said that Josh Heupel has been given an open checkbook to compete with anyone in the SEC in terms of the money he has at his disposal, NIL money, collective money, et cetera. Do you agree with that, that Tennessee has as much money in the SEC as anyone else? Because the question then becomes, if you do, why aren't you spending it? Or are you spending it to the – now, we'll get into the David Sanders situation too, because that may be a good example. But tell me, do they have – comparable budget to anyone in the SEC?
I think it's at least comparable. I can't say that it's number one in the SEC, but I think it's right up there with anybody else. Ohio State's the one that gets a lot of attention. They're probably not a great comparison for anyone in the country.
Plus, they went all in after they watched Michigan win the national title. I don't know that their roster is going to be $20 million every single season.
Yeah. Probably the perception out there, at least among people that follow recruiting, would be that maybe Texas has the deepest pockets in the SEC, and outside of that, Tennessee probably isn't number one, but they're probably within striking distance of number one, and that means you're able to win any recruiting battle you want. The problem is, just like anybody else, you've got to pick your spots. If one player, a David Sanders, is worth it to you, and you pay what you have to get a player like that, that takes away your ability to go win 2 or 3 other recruiting battles maybe. So you just have to pick your spots and decide. It kind of becomes like a salary cap at a certain point when everybody has comparable money. How are you going to spend yours? And you have to spend it as effectively and efficiently as possible to make sure that you're winning as many battles as possible.
Right. In the David Sanders situation, there's talk out there that Ohio State wound up offering him much less than what Tennessee did. That Tennessee and you've talked about this before, that the Ohio States, the Alabamas, and the Georgias of the world, because they crank players into the pros, they have a discount. They get a special rate from some players. The word on the street, whether that's Gay Street or Cumberland Avenue, word on the avenue, is that Tennessee had to really go all in with Sanders, like north of 7 figures, and that Ohio State wasn't having to go anywhere near that. True or false?
I don't know Ohio State's number that was on the table, but I think Tennessee did have to go had to go pretty heavy to win that battle. So yes, I think there's some truth to that. But yeah, as you said, kind of the cost of doing business when you're a program that doesn't have that reputation yet of just cranking out early draft picks. That's the thing. Tennessee's doing a better job now of putting guys in the pros. You need more James Pierce types who have a chance to go in the first round and become household names. Ohio State can point to guys in the pros, I mean, Paris Johnson and guys like that who've come out in recent years at his position, and others who've been first-round picks. So once you have the ability, like an Ohio State, like an Alabama, like a Georgia, to point to your track record, it makes things a lot easier. And yeah, they tend to get by a lot of times by reputation and saying, hey, you can come here and be a pro, and that's a better investment in your future than worrying about $500,000 now.
Yeah. All right, so the reason I took it in that direction is what we're saying is Tennessee has the money. If they want to spend it on Ricky Gibson, they've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any chance then that Gibson isn't in this just for more money? He's just not happy. Is there any chance he's not happy? Is there any chance Tennessee may just say, yeah, you can go to the door? Is there any way, in other words, they're either going to pay him or not? It's going to come down to cash, nothing else. Is that your take?
I think so. Yeah. I think this is about money. I don't think it's about him being unhappy. He's a starter. He was a starter as a sophomore, so I don't think he's got any reason to be upset about his situation.
No, you never know what's going on in a kid's life behind the scenes.
Sure.
But yeah.
But yeah, nothing I've gathered so far suggests that's a problem. And again, he's got a great situation this year where he essentially could open the year as the number one cornerback. So it's an awesome opportunity for him in an SEC school. He could leave and be a starter elsewhere, no doubt. But I don't think there's any reason that he's unhappy with his current situation, and it seems to be about money from everything we've heard.
Last question I'll ask you, and this is just a general question. Anything we need to know about what's going on the recruiting trail? How's the new class? How are they off and running with this class?
They're off to a good start. They got another commitment last week from C.J. Edwards, edge rusher from New Jersey, up to 8 commitments now for the class. That's a pretty healthy number for Tennessee historically to have that in early March. And then recruiting visits just started up this Monday, so spring practice is starting up. It's a chance for Tennessee to host a bunch of visitors over the next several weeks, and that could kind of allow them to build on the momentum they have. Already in good shape with a lot of big targets they're going to be battling for the next few months. But it's a top 10 class right now and very early, but the guys they've gotten are good, and it looks like they've continued to build on what they've accomplished the last couple of years. Well,
that's kind of what I was going to ask you here as a final hit. Last year they were in on a little bit higher quality guy. Mm-hmm. If you just looked at their average target, it was a little bit higher. Is that a one-year blip, or do you think they're in that ballpark again? They're going to continue to maintain to be in there recruiting against the Georgias and the Ohio States, as opposed to they beat Georgia Tech for this guy.
Yeah.
Are they in this class doing the same thing they did last year?
It looks like it. Now that being said, I think the distinction there is the volume. How many of those players are you in on? How many of the top 100 players in the country do you have a good shot at in the end? Things like that. So, and of course, everybody's board is different. So Tennessee's take on the top 100 players differs from others. That's part of it too. But regardless, are they getting in on enough of those? Because you're gonna hit a certain percentage of those historically. Are you in on enough of those players to give you the chances of having the type of class you want in the end? And last year we saw, I think it was Josh Heupel's best class at Tennessee. It still ended up outside the top 10 on National Signing Day. So it's a very good class. I think what that's showing you is the depth of the programs that have the resources to be very good in recruiting now. And that's the problem. Tennessee's doing well. They're recruiting at a higher level than they were even in the 2023 class when they landed Nico and had a class that ranked number 10. This class was better than that one, but the problem is more teams are having that level of class, and that makes it tough.
And I keep saying that's it, but it's not it. We're just going to hang around and chat for a while. That takes me in another direction. The booster I talked to, not happy with where things are. Heupel, the reason I was told Heupel's got a blank check. He's an open checkbook, I should say. He's got as much money as anybody else. Why are we recruiting 10th and 11th and 12th in the nation? Why aren't we top 5? Why aren't we built like Ohio State? Now, to me, trying to say why aren't we Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama, that's a tough place to get to. I get it. That's the target for everybody, sure. But even, why aren't you Oregon? Why are you still outside the top 10? If we're saying you've got as much money as anybody in the SEC except maybe Texas, why are you not in the top 5? Why are you not in the top 4? Why are you not in the top 3?
I think we touched on it earlier. You got to, in some cases, you got to spend a little more than other programs that maybe have the reputation. That's a little bit of a challenge. And then they don't have Oregon's resource. Oregon, allegedly, unlimited resources out there with Phil Knight.
With Phil Knight. That's a bad example.
Yeah, so you got Oregon, you got Texas that's got a ton of money,
still,
Ohio State.
Yeah, but if you've got if you've got as good of money as anybody in the SEC.
Yeah.
All right, so Alabama, Georgia, Texas. Texas got the money. Alabama and Georgia have the track record of NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't you be 4th in the SEC instead of 7th in the SEC?
And
8th in the SEC, which is where you were last year?
And then it comes back to how you're spending your money, and I think that's where Tennessee and all programs, for that matter, have to continue to review what they're doing. One thing Tennessee's done, they've got a commitment from Faison Brandon, currently 24/7 Sports #1 overall player in the 2026 class. Obviously, they've had Nico on the roster the last few years. George McIntyre was a highly ranked guy. They've invested heavily in the quarterback position.
Yeah.
That's one thing I think they might have to go back and assess long term. Is that something that's been the best use of their resources? The issue is not about Tennessee having the money to go take care of Ricky Gibson and keep him. The issue is, if you do that, does it take away your ability to keep 1 or 2 other guys elsewhere? And so there's always a trade-off. Just like, again, it's a salary cap at a certain point. So if you make that decision, you have to deal with the ramifications. So they've made decisions. They've got to go back and kind of self-assess. Are we making the best decisions in every case? I'm sure in a lot of cases it is. In some cases it might not be, and that might be where the distinction is. Are they going over the top basically to get guys and get the right ones, as opposed to maybe being a little more prudent? They catch some flack sometimes for, okay, if this guy's interested, why are we finishing second for him? Sometimes you have to draw a line on the money, and that's the smart thing to do. You have to be responsible long term. On the flip side, you've got to win the right battles and make sure you're getting the players that you think are going to be pros one day.
And see, the problem is, and this is why I brought it up, when you say you've got to draw the line somewhere, you've got to manage this, that's true.
Yeah.
That's just honesty. Mm-hmm. But when fans hear and boosters say, unlimited checkbook,
that's
unlimited resources. So if you're saying unlimited resources and you got an open checkbook, why do you have to manage anything? Just give $1 billion to every recruit.
Yeah, no, there's a budget. Every single year there's a budget.
For every school.
Yeah, and they're for that matter, they're planning what their budget's going to be for 2026 right now. So you have to have a good idea of what you're going to do, and you have to stick to it, and you have to have a plan and stick to it. That's why all these schools, I've been asked a lot of questions. I think we've even discussed it before. Should Tennessee hire a general manager? That's one of the reasons schools are doing this, is to make sure they're planning it out, making sure they're making the right decisions on where to put their money and how to invest it.
And just to be clear, when we talked about that in the past, the head coach is the guy that's making the final decision at just about every program. So the general manager is just a title, and more than likely, Tennessee has a guy who acts in that. Every school has a different name for him. Some are saying general manager, other it's the VP of player personnel and all that. They still pro terms. But Tennessee has guys who are doing that. It's not. There are people out there who think, why don't we have one?
Right.
Like you're doing without. You've got people playing that role at the moment. Now, some schools are going out and getting NFL veterans. That Oklahoma just did that. Mm-hmm. You've got other schools who are going in that. Now, that's a little different than what we've seen. North Carolina, Bill Belichick has Michael Lombardi attached like a barnacle, and he's going to be the general manager for North Carolina. And he's been an NFL GM. That's a little different. Mm-hmm. So is it time for Tennessee to go after one of those guys? Let's see if it works at North Carolina and Oklahoma, I would say.
I think the only thing you can say about that is it never hurts to have a guy in the room helping you make decisions who's managed an NFL salary cap or made NFL decisions before. So that's the only downside to Tennessee's situation, is they haven't aggressively gone out and gotten that guy with NFL experience to help with that. Now, that doesn't mean that the head coach in all those programs isn't the one making the decision at the end of the day. So are you hiring a guy to be truly a general manager? Not necessarily, in most cases at least, but it never hurts to have another voice in the room that has some experience in managing those things, and Tennessee might eventually come to the point where they decide they need to go that route.
John Gruden.
You're onto something.
Finally, John Gruden.
He's coming back for their coaching clinic.
That's right. It's just opening the door for him to come back as GM.
Yep.
Joking. Don't start the groomers. I do think, though, it's interesting that a lot of people just look at it. The dynamic has changed so much. It used to be, can you recruit? Can you coach? Now it's, can you recruit? Can you coach? Can you manage the cap? I think talent evaluation, it's always been very important. It's wildly important now.
Oh, yeah.
You better have a good eye, because you're now having to put money into it. You can't just say, you make a mistake at quarterback, that would have burned you in the past. You make a mistake at quarterback now, and you're giving this guy $2 million a year or whatever.
Yep.
Okay, now that burns your program down, that'll get your ass fired.
Yeah.
So that is a different level. The talent evaluation, the coaching, the recruiting, how you manage the cap, or manage your roster, how much money you have coming in. There's just a lot of stuff moving around there, but I still know that most fans look at it and go, if we've got all our stuff, we shouldn't be 10 or 11 overall. We should be number 1. We should be 2, 3, 4, 5 at least. And in the SEC, we shouldn't be 7th or 8th. There's no reason Tennessee should be behind Auburn, is the way they look at it. There's no way Tennessee should be behind Texas A&M, although the Aggies have some serious oil money as well.
Yeah.
But fans just don't want the excuses, and they think of it as an excuse. And to be honest with you, I'll go to a line with that too. If you're telling me Tennessee has everything they need, and they're opposite Auburn, I don't ever want to see Auburn ahead of Tennessee. Well, that may happen on occasion, but on a regular basis, I'm sorry, Tennessee needs to be out recruiting, out spending, out everythinging Auburn, in my opinion. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn's pretty well sourced on their end. So
and they're driven by the Alabama hatred. They're going to throw money like madmen.
I mean, they went out last year to protect a lot of the top in-state players in Alabama, and they dominated those top 10 guys. Alabama hardly got anybody out of that group. So there are challenges. I mean, when everyone has money in the SEC, it's not easy to win any recruiting battle. So, and at a certain point, here's the other part of this too that you got to be smart about. When someone comes to you, a recruit, asking you for more money so that he will commit to your school, are you chasing ghosts if you give him what he asked for, or are you bidding against somebody who legitimately has more money on the table? You've got to be smart enough to read those situations. So there are a lot of layers to this, and how you have to be smart as a school. How much above the other school are you willing to go to make sure you get a player? It's just it's a trickier thing than I think fans want to realize from the outside. And the other thing is, you've got to again, what we talked about, like how is Tennessee's money being spent? Last year, one of the things, they spent a lot of money on Lance Hurd out of the transfer portal. Yeah. They spent a lot of money on keeping some veterans on the roster like John Campbell, Cooper Mays, guys like that. Some of them worked out really well. Some maybe didn't, and that's
your tackles didn't.
And that's where you go into it and say, okay, could we have gone out and upgraded the roster? And Josh Heupel has kind of bet on culture. He's bet on
development,
continuity, and development.
Yeah.
And when you do that, we saw the downside of that is maybe you end up in the college football playoff against a team like Ohio State, and you don't have the horses to measure up over 4 quarters.
Yeah, and the thing is, nobody really did have the horses to measure up with Ohio State over 4 quarters. They got a bad break on that one.
They did.
Because you also got a pissed off Ohio State, fresh off the Michigan thing. In past years, they've cratered after losing to Michigan. This time, it was it drove them to a national title. So that was a bad break. You should have been at home against SMU. And probably fans are looking at it a little differently if you've won a playoff game and you lose in the second round. Absolutely. They're not going to be happy, but at least you got a home game. You beat somebody in theory. It is, I will say this. We will close with this. I'll finish up here. The Nico situation for next year, with the money they've invested in him, with the money they added on for him, whatever that is, they got more. He's going to have to become a player who lifts those around him. He cannot just be the guy who, we've got everything in place and he manages that. And that's kind of what he was this year.
Yep.
I didn't think he got better as the year went on. I thought he did get better as the year went on, but he never hit the level where I thought, oh man, next year. And that's kind of the way I went into this season. I didn't expect him to win Heisman's this year.
Yeah.
I thought by the end of the year, if he's cranking, then you can look toward real success the following year. I didn't feel like he was cranking at the end of the year. Now, Ohio State, he was kind of left out there by himself, and he ran his ass off and took a beating, did everything he could. But I've yet to see anything last season that left me thinking. I went into last season thinking he's got the potential to be a really special quarterback.
Yeah.
I left last season thinking, he's okay. He can't be that next year. If he is, then that's one where I think everybody's going to rightly come back and say, boy, who's evaluating your talent and how did you spend your money?
Nico, we'll see whether he ends up. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what he did this past year, and we'll see. It may be a step on the way to becoming a Heisman contender this year.
Yep.
Well, we'll see. So if he takes a big step, this team's going to be pretty good, and that investment is going to have been well worth it. But he may be a cautionary tale for Tennessee. We'll see when you invest heavily in quarterbacks from the start, which you have to do to get top talent at that position. But when you do it, that position's a 50-50 proposition at best sometimes. And we're seeing maybe, in his case, why. I mean, ask Clemson about how things worked out with DJ Uiagalelei. I mean,
imagine if Tennessee had given. I mean, they got a number 2 quarterback in the country in terms of dual threat guys. Imagine if you'd spent big NIL dollars on Jarrett Garantano.
Yeah, and that's
the poor guy just never developed.
Right.
Jonathan Crompton.
Jonathan Crompton, yeah.
It's another one of those guys that everybody had to get on the field, and
Yep.
it's like, oh, well, he's okay.
Now, Nico's at a higher level than either of those guys.
Yes.
And I will say
He is.
we've gotten better as an industry in evaluating talent over the years at the quarterback position, and guys are just more established now. So we're hitting on more of those top guys now, but if that class, which we thought was a generational quarterback class with Arch Manning and Dante Moore and some other good players, if he's the guy that doesn't work out in that class, it's gonna be a frustration, obviously, and something Tennessee has to go back and reassess long term of, do you keep investing? And Faison Brandon may end up being another good test case too. How are these big investments in quarterbacks working out? And for a school that has to work a little harder sometimes to win some recruiting battles, is that the best use of your resources? When Josh Heupel is known for his work with less talented quarterbacks, maybe he's taken guys who were less heralded coming out of high school and made them stars in his system, is maybe a more prudent approach to spend a little less on quarterbacks and put that money elsewhere.
Be interesting to see. Ryan Callahan, I always love having you in here, and I can just makes it easy. You just throw them out here and let you smack it home. Good deal. Ryan Callahan, GoVols247.com. You can find him there. If you like content like this was just kind of an emergency special edition podcast, but we've got all over the channel. We've got football, basketball, Lady Vols, you name it. If you like content like this, hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. That helps other Vol fans find something like this. And we'll see you next time on the Sports Source Digital Network.